You're watching Truth Talk News.
The world order, as we know it, is an old order. It's been in place for centuries. The New World Order brings it to a new level where they can finally get a world government in place, as has been the goal of the elite class, the ultra elite, the uber elite. The best way to understand the New World Order is to review events from the past. These are excerpts from Eustace Mullins' The World Order, 1984, pages 80 through 88. Many Americans are puzzled by the relentless devotion of the Rockefeller Foundation to financing communist organizations in many parts of the world. This dedication to communism can be traced back to a crucial moment in the Bolshevik march to power. In 1917, Mackenzie King had established a lifelong relationship with John D. Rockefeller Jr., whom he met in June 1914. They had been born the same year, 1874, and seemed to agree on everything. Soon King was working closely with Frederick T. Gates and Ivy Lee to further the Rockefeller philanthropies, which seemed to view communism as the ideal vehicle to bring about world brotherhood. King wrote this to his friend Violet Markham: John D. Rockefeller Jr., the truest follower of Christ, has one purpose: to serve his fellow man. Yeah, for dinner. King resolved that his one purpose was to serve Rockefeller. He testified for him at the trial investigating the Colorado Iron and Fuel Company massacre, known as the Ludlow Massacre, 1914. Before the Walsh Committee, the Rockefellers later tried to have Walsh framed and expelled from the Senate, but failed due to the obstinacy of Burton J. Wheeler. J. Edgar Hoover played a crucial role in setting up the frame. What a shock there. And then, of course, we know who J. Edgar Hoover was. Another heavily controlled individual, although he appeared to be master of the control. You know, the man behind the scenes of Hoover was Rockefeller. And, of course, brought him to power with the FBI and the propaganda that lifted the FBI to its iconic cult status, whereas now we have television shows with glorifying the FBI and CIA as these wonderful organizations, which are tarnished, to say the least, ladies and gentlemen. Anyway, the Rockefellers helped Mackenzie King obtain the government contracts for the Canadian Army during World War I, going back to 1914, which set King up for a later blackmail, the Panama hold over the vessels. King sold hundreds of tons of rotten meat to be sent to the Canadian Army in Europe, boots of leather which were mostly pasteboard and which disintegrated immediately in the water-soaked trenches, rifles that jammed when they were fired, and the collar-type life preservers, which were previously condemned, which broke the soldiers' necks when they jumped into the water. How nice and loving and cunning and beautiful is that? All in one statement. How wonderful it is to just not care about humanity at all and just make profit at all costs and make tons of money and just give shoddy things, cause lives, and not even care about these useless eaters. Well, the first job of the CFR, which was established in 1921 here in New York City, in the United States. Actually, the concept of it came out of the entire peace, the Treaty of Versailles peace accords for the reparations of Germany in 1919 Paris Peace Conference. This conference led to the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations, which was originally called, I believe, the International Relations, and then they changed it to Council on Foreign Relations. Again, just to try to disguise, at the same time right in your face with what they're doing. But the CFR was to gain control of the press. That was the first intention of it. And this task was given to John D. Rockefeller, who set up a number of national news magazines such as Life and Time. He financed Samuel Newhouse to buy up and establish a chain of newspapers all across the country, and Eugene Meyer also, who would go on to buy up many publications such as the Washington Post, Newsweek, and the Weekly Magazine. Again, to sway public opinion, to mind control, for lack of a better word, and propagandize their agendas, moving towards a one-world government, slowly destroying the vestiges of capitalism that we know. As there are collectivists, collectivism is in direct contradiction to capitalism, because capitalism gives the opportunity for everyone to become wealthy, and their propaganda is, oh, that's just their tyrants. But no, they're collectivists. They're not capitalists. Capitalists aren't the problem, ladies and gentlemen. They're the solution. The problem are these socialist, communist, authoritarian collectivists like John D. Rockefeller and his ilk and his progeny, who we live with today under a closing society where 14,000 tanks, mine-proof tanks, were purchased by the Department of Homeland Security. This is March 2013. I mean, can we be more Orwellian than that? Okay, moving along. So now we know that King was a scumbag. You know, personally, well, you know, he's involved with the Rockefellers. He's obviously going to be a corrupt, evil individual. Well, Leon Trotsky was in New York in 1917. He gave a word to return to Russia at once to help bring off the Bolshevik seizure of power. The Rockefellers gave him $10,000 in cash for his journey, procured a special passport for him from President Woodrow Wilson, and sent Lincoln Steffens to safeguard him on the journey. When Trotsky's ship stopped in Halifax, the Canadian Secret Service, warned that he was on board, arrested him on April 3rd, 1917, and interned him in Nova Scotia. The patriotic agents knew that Trotsky was on his way back to Russia to take Russia out of the war against Germany, which would free many German divisions to attack the Canadian troops on the Western Front. Prime Minister Lloyd George indignantly cabled demands from London that Trotsky be released, but the Secret Service ignored him. By means never explained, Mackenzie King then stepped up into the breach and obtained Trotsky's freedom. Trotsky continued on his way to Russia and became Lenin's chief deputy in the extermination of Russian citizens. This is what happened. This is the truth. That's what you get here, Truth Talk News. He also organized the Red Army with the help of Wall Street lawyer Thomas D. Thatcher. The agents who had arrested Trotsky were dismissed from the service, and their careers were ended. As a reward for his intervention, the Rockefellers appointed Mackenzie King head of the Rockefeller Foundation Department of Industrial Research at a salary of $30,000 a year, when the average wage in the U.S. at the time was $500 per year. Frank P. Walsh testified before a U.S. commission that the Rockefeller Foundation was a cloak for the Rockefeller plan to lead organized labor into slavery, and that's exactly what they've done. So that passed his prologue, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. King also became a director of the Carnegie Corporation. A Lady Lauria left him a large mansion in Ottawa, and in 1921 a group of well-wishers led by Peter Larkin refurbished and staffed it for him at the cost of $255,000. King then appointed Larkin High Commissioner of Canada in London. In 1940, the Canadian Parliament voted King, then Prime Minister of Canada, absolute and dictatorial powers for the duration. On King's 74th birthday in 1948, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave him $100,000. The Rockefeller Foundation then put up $300,000 to pay for the writing of King's memoirs. In his final years, King, still on the take, was exposed as a principal in the $30 million Beauharnais Power Company swindle during the building of the St. Lawrence Seaway. King had accepted $700,000 from Beauharnais for the Liberal Party, and among other enticements, had received a trip to Bermuda. The Rockefellers figured in many pro-Soviet deals during the 1920s. Because of the struggle for power, which developed between Stalin and Trotsky, the Rockefellers intervened in October 1926 and backed Stalin, ousting Trotsky. John D. Rockefeller instructed his press agent, Ivy Lee, in 1925 to promote communism in the United States and to spark-plug a public relations drive, which culminated in 1933 with the U.S. government recognition of Soviet Russia. In 1927, Standard Oil of New Jersey built a refinery in Russia after having been promised 50% of the Caucasus oil production. Rockefeller firm Vacuum Oil signed an agreement with the Soviet Naphtha syndicate to sell Russian oil in Europe and made a $75 million loan to Russia. John Moody had stated in 1911, the Standard Oil Company was really a bank of the most gigantic character, a bank within an industry, lending vast sums of money to needy borrowers just as other great banks were doing. During the 1920s, the principal firms doing business with Russia were Vacuum Oil, International Harvester, Guaranteed Trust, and New York Life, all firms controlled by the Morgan Rockefeller interests. The Rockefeller family is sometimes called the first family of the Soviet Union. When Nelson Rockefeller was nominated for vice president in 1967, Pravda indignantly denounced his critics, saying that charges against Rockefeller were designed only to discredit him and that the accusations came from ultra-right-wing organizations. Isn't that what they keep saying? The same concept with these communists? The democoms? Okay? These socialist communists that don't even realize that they're socialists and communists. They just think that they're, about for the working class people, who they rape and pillage. The false left-right paradigm, ladies and gentlemen. All right, moving along. So, Senator Frank Church, attending the 1971 Dartmouth Conference at Kiev, was amazed to find that David Rockefeller was treated like we would treat royalty in that country. The Russian people appear to evince an adoration of Rockefeller that is puzzling. When David Rockefeller's plane lands in Russia, crowds lined up to greet him at the airport and line the streets of Moscow as his limousine passes, hailing him with cries of Rockefeller. George Gilder remarked that no one knows how to revere, blandish, and exalt a Rockefeller half as well as the Marxists. How true is that? In September 1960, Khrushchev was entertained at Hyde Park at a dinner given in his honor by Eleanor Roosevelt. Present at this select gathering was Victor Hammer, who had fenced the Romanovs' jewels in the United States. He sold many Fabergé items to Lillian Pratt, wife of General Motors tycoon. The collection is now in the Virginia Museum in Richmond, Virginia. In 1973, the U.S.-USR Trade and Economic Council, consisting of leading U.S. heads of corporation, was formed to promote trade, which is basically gifts, to the Soviet Union. In 1976, G.M. Miller of Textron was named head of the council. Shortly afterwards, he was appointed chairman of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors by President Carter. The Bolshevik Revolution, which was nurtured through its most trying days by three directors of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, William Boyce Thompson, George Foster Peabody, and William Woodard, continued to be supported by the Federal Reserve System. The Federal Reserve System maintains close ties with the Gosbank, the Soviet central bank. This is again before the fall of communism and of course since, which controls the Communist Party of the USSR. Gosbank employs 5,000 economists and is known as a passive rather than an active bank of issue, meaning that it follows orders from other sources, as does the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. The Gosbank Federal Reserve System cooperation in Soviet financial letters is handled through the Bank for International Settlements in Switzerland, the heart of the New World Order. I'm Howard Niemann. Thank you for watching Truth Talk News.